Hello, my name is Hasha Sakib, and today I'm presenting about my research on Viasakt KA cyber attack, which happened in 2022. So, this is a critical analysis of caution, execution, and strategic consequences in hybrid warfare. Moving towards these are the four research questions this presentation is based on. Number one, we have caution. What specific technical and organizational conditions made this attack possible, and were they aberrant or structural? Number two is execution. How did the attacks design reflect deliberate strategic calculations rather than opportunistic explosions? Number three, we have the consequence. How do we explain the disproportion between the attack's technical simplicity and its geopolitical reach across multiple sovereign states? And lastly, we have classification. Does this incident meet recognized legal and doctrinal thresholds for cyber warfare? And what does the international community response reveal about the limits of existing frameworks? Let's look into a bit of the background. Why satellite ground infrastructure is a structurally attractive target? So, I have put down three main points on this. Number one, dual use entanglement. Because commercial satellite operators serve military, governmental, and civilian customers on shared or infrastructure segment infrastructure. This is one of the point of dual use entanglement. And I would also like to say that over 80% of military satellite communications now ride on constellations, which is a structural dependency, not an incidental one. Our second point is cost to impact ratio. So, this attack required no satellite expertise, no signal interceptions, or no orbital access. What it required was one single VPN credential leak. The disproportion between attacker effort and strategic yield is itself the object of analysis hallmark of what military theorists call an asymmetric force multiplier. Lastly, in our main third point, which is ground segment as systematic weak points. So, space cybersecurity discourse has historically focused on the space and link segments. The Viasat case empirically demonstrates that the ground segment management serves VPN appliances modem provisioning system is the more exploitable and more consequential attack surface. So the critical point here is the vulnerability was not in the satellite, it was in terrestrial enterprise IT, the same category of weakness exploited in countless non-space breaches. This is a basic timeline that I put together for you guys to better understand. So in early February 2022, uh, Pre-secure cyber operations target a Ukrainian government and financial infrastructure consistent with established Russian pre-conflict shaping doctrine. On February 23, 2022, DDoS operations were disrupting Ukrainian banking and government web infrastructure. On February 24, 2022, acid rain tag was deployed against KSAT modems, disabling tens of thousands of devices in Ukraine and across the whole of Europe. On February 24, Russian ground invasions of Ukraine formally began 1 hour after the cyber payload detonations. Then, in late March, Senti Labs publishes technical attribution linking acid rain to VPN filter and Russian state tooling. And then, in May 10, coordinated formal attributions to Russia by EU, US, and UK, and nearly 20 other countries among the largest multilateral attribution actions in the history of state-sponsored cyber incidents. Let's look at the critical analysis. Why the attack succeeded. So I have put together 4 points on why the attack succeeded, as in layers. So layer number one, vendor patching failure. So Fortinet originally released a patch for CV 2018 13379 years before the attack. So, but there is no public evidence that Skylogic applied the patch. Layer number two, configuration failure. Independent of patching, the VPN appliances was misconfigured in a way that permitted unauthorized access to the management segment, which is an architectural decision failure. Layer number four, architecture failure. The absence of meaningful internal segmentations meant a single point of compromise yielded broad lateral access. This violates a foundational zero trust principle, which is no single credential should grant access to an entire fleet management capability. Layer number four, Viasat's ground segment was operated by a subsidiary Skylogic under a different corporation structure than Viasat itself, illustrating a recurring pattern in critical infrastructure incidents. Named security accountability becomes diffuse across vendor and sub vendor relationships, and no single entity owns end-to-end risk. So basically, in the main central thesis, the Viasat's attack was not enabled by sophisticated novel tradecraft. It was enabled by ordinary, well understood enterprise security failure, the kind documented in thousands of non space breaches annually. What made this incident extraordinary was not the intrusion method but the blast radius of what the compromised system controlled. The attack's strategic significance is a property of target selection and system designs, not attackers' sophistication. This is my case study one. It's from Ukraine, and it says the intended target and mechanism of disruption. So this case study states that at approximately 3:02 UTC on 24 February 2022, roughly an hour before Russian ground forces invaded Ukrainian borders, attackers reached the trusted management segment of the KASAT network through a misconfigured VPN appliance at Turin ground station operated by Skylogic. As I mentioned, the attackers only attacked the Viasat's infrastructure to one VPN credential leak. A utilist subsidiary, Skylogic, which is a Utilsat subsidiary. From that privileged foothold, they issued legitimate but destructive management commands across selective spot beams, overwriting key data in flash memory of SurfBeam 2 and SurfBeam 2 Plus, which are consumers' modems, and combining these consumer modems, traffic-based denial of service. This combined with the consumer-based modems is a traffic-based denial of service. The result was tens of thousands of terminals forced offline across Ukraine and the Europe. Ukraine was an intended target. Its armed forces relied on substantially on Viasat's provided satellite connectivity for command and control communications. Particularly given pre-existing damage to terrestrial telecommunications infrastructure is contested regions. So the attack's timing directly degraded Ukrainian military coordination capacity during the single most critical window of conflict, which is just 1 hour. The initial hour, one rapid situational awareness and unit coordination determined battlefield outcomes. Let's look at the critical analysis of this study. This is the clearest case in modern history of a cyber attack functioning as a literal opening move in kinetic military campaign. It did not merely support kinetic operations from a distance, but it directly preceded and enabled them, much like an artillery barrage before an infantry advance. This provides strong evidence for treating cyber and kinetic operations as a unified, not parallel strategic tool, challenging the older framing of cyber as a peripheral or merely disruptive instrument. To maintain analytical rigor and avoid overstatement, it's important to note that Viasat's high assurance government services ran on the separate network and remained functional. So only a small part of Viasat services ran out of network. Let's look at our second case study. It's from Germany and states collateral damage to the energy sector. So this case study says that approximately 5,800 Enercon wind turbines remote SCADA monitoring and control capability as a consequence of KSAT modem disablement. So basically, what happened was that wind turbines lost their SCADA monitoring. This does not mean that they were stopped and they were not functioning completely, but this means that they were running automatically and no user could remotely access them or change their movement according to weather, or they could not do real time fault diagnosis. Let's look at our critical analysis. So the term collateral damage in this case study is misleading because this was a critical consequence of architectural design, not just bad luck. So an attacker with basically conscience of case SAT customer base could have anticipated a cascade into the energy sector, given that he knows the patterns of SCADA over satellite internet deployment in distributed renewable infrastructure. So the KASAT network, multi-tenant by design, makes the consumer broadband, enterprise links, and industrial telemetry. Two analytical consequences follow. First, the attack functioned as a single point of failure for an entire category or critical infrastructure energy monitoring, despite Germany being a non belligerent. Second, the foreseeability of the exposure challenges international humanitarian law, which is also known as IHL. So IHL's distinctions between intended and collateral effects phrase when applied to inherently shared multi-tenant infrastructure, an effect that is technically united and can still be entirely predictable, sitting uneasily with legal categories built for kinetic single target warfare. Let's look at our last case study, which is from France. So, this case study states that approximately 9,000 French KASAT subscribers lost internet access, with some outage persisting beyond 2 weeks because the wipers corrupted the flash memory rather than just putting the modems or knocking them offline. Many terminals could not be restored remotely and required physical replacement, which meant Viasat distributed tens of thousands of replacement modems across affected European footprints to bring customers just back on. This French case is analytically useful precisely because it's undramatic, because there's no military stake, no strategic asset, and no role involved. There was simply a civilian population in a non belligerent state cut off from connectivity for weeks as a second order effect to operation aimed at Ukraine. Critical analysis of this case study. In this, I have pointed out two main points. Number one, the attribution race. So, France's Space Command, led by Jen Fielding, swiftly confirmed the incident as a cyber attack 2 months before multilateral attributions by the EU, US, and UK ever did. This early unilateral action signals a notable shift in cyber diplomacy. Number two, proportionality questions. The French case exposes critical proportionality issues under international humanitarian law, IHL. The attacks impact extended to bystander civilians with no operational stake, challenging IHL's frameworks designed for geopolitical bounded kinetic warfare. So this is a comparative CETA's chart of the damages and dimensions between all three of the states which I took the case study from. So, uh, causal relationship in Ukraine was directly intended. Germany, it was indirect or foreseeable as the SCADA monitoring systems could have been foreseeable before. Sorry, the attack. And France, it was indirect and also foreseeable. In sector, Ukraine's was military slash governmental, Germany was energy slash SCADA, and France was just civilian broadband. Strategic functions. For Ukraine, it was battlefield denial. For Germany, it demonstrates systematic risk. And for France, it demonstrates diplomatic slash civilian exposure. Lastly, in evidentiary role, it establishes hybrid warfare timing thesis in Ukraine. In Germany, it establishes infrastructure independency thesis, and in France, it establishes attribution norm thesis. The analytical value of comparing these three together is that no single case fully explains the incident significance. Ukraine framed that it was a conventional military support operation. Germany framed it was a critical infrastructure resilience failure, and France frames it as a civilian protection and international law problem. Does this meet the threshold for cyber warfare? To move beyond a mere description, we must analyze the Viasat's cyber attack through the lens of international law, specifically the Talon Manual 2.0, which is the leading scholarly restatement of how existing international law apply to cyber operations. So legal thresholds of this are use of force and arm attack. In use of force, as defined by Article 2, Sector 4 of the UN Charter, that this threshold prohibits the threat of use of force against the territorial integrity of political independence of any state. Which is a cyber operation reaches this if its scale and effects are comparable to those of traditional kinetic attack. In armed attack, the higher thresholds from Article 51 of the UN Charter triggering a state inherent right to self defense. A cyber operation qualifies if it causes death, injury, or significant to destruction akin to actual kinetic attack. The Firesat's attack's impact on Ukraine is evaluated against this. Attribution as a geopolitical instrument. Technical versus diplomatic gap. Technical attribution linking acid rain to Russian actors preceded formal diplomatic attribution by 6 weeks, illustrating the gap between forensic certainty and political action. Landmarks multilateral attribution. A joint statement from 20 states, including Five Eyes and EU, represents one of the largest coordinated attributions involving international norm of state responsibility in cyber operations. Uh, Given the use of force classification, not armed attack from the previous slide, what functional function does formal multilateral attribution actually serve? Is if it carries no automatic legal or military consequence. Economic and systematic costs. Direct costs for Viasat. So Viasat incurred substantial immediate expenses, including shipping over 30,000 modems in countries like France and in Europe. Additionally, significant unbudgeted funds were allocated to third-party forensic specialists, Mendians for incident response and recovery efforts. Indirect and systematic costs. Affected European utilities and ISPs absorbed diffuse. largely unquantified costs. So these included emergency manual monitoring procedures, providing redundant connectivity, and accelerating cyber security investments. These systematic costs are often underpriced in headline damage estimates. So public damage estimates are incomplete by design, as Viasat, as a publicly traded company, has limited incentive for full cost transfer. Lastly, I have pointed out four main points for our conclusion. Number one is dual use infrastructure. So this presentation demonstrates that dual use infrastructure collapses the conventional military slash civilian distinction that much of international humanitarian law still assumes. Then this attack demonstrates the cyber and connected operations are increasingly designed as a single integrated sequence, not parallel or supported tracks, which is evidenced by 1 hour timing precision in integrated operations. Next, we have exploitable legal ambiguity. This demonstrates the legal ambiguity below the armed attack threshold is an exploitable strategic resource, not an unresolved doctrinal accident. The state actors appear to calibrate operations significantly to remain in the gray zone. Lastly, we have decoupled impact. This demonstrates that attack sophistication and strategic impact are decoupled. This incident required no novel technique, only the exploitation of ordinary, well documented security failure against a target whose systematic interconnectedness amplified consequences far beyond the attacker's technical investment. The most unsettling finding of this case is not that Russia attacked Viasat, it is that conditioning conditions making such attack effective. Unpatched parameter systems, flat international networks, diffuse supply chain accountability, and ambiguous legal thresholds. They are not unique to YSAT and are not unique to space sectors and remain substantially unaddressed across critical infrastructure globally as this written. These are my references for all who need to cross check, and that's about it. Thank you all for going to my presentation.